we are now in the third experts workshop. The first one was held in 2014. The second one was last year in this very room, or a lot of it in this very room. And here we are again in 2017. What that has generated is actually quite a lot of content. So there have been a large number of case study presentations, many of them made by people in this room, both at this event and previously. And I think what John is looking for here is some guidance. It was, in fact, the Asia-Pacific Regional Secretariat which dived into the content of community engagement in a World Heritage City content, and then that was carried through 2 years ago in Peru with the Arequipa decision to have the theme of this World Congress, which Asia Pacific's hosted. There are, I think, two, if not three, big questions here. One is it worth actually putting out a case study book that could share these case studies more broadly with the wider World Heritage Cities community? Are there other things that could be done to implement the tools? And I think the final dot point there is actually saying, well, where does OWHC Asia Pacific go next? You know, if there is a workshop held next year at a regional meeting, what should it do? Might ask you about the book first, and for those who are still not fully awake this morning, bear in mind if we all sign on for a book, those of us who presented case studies over the years are going to have to provide chapters. Nils.
My first question would be more, what is the framework about all of this? Like, what is the intention, the objective, and who's the target group? And I think when you clarify this, then it's much easier to decide, will it be a guidebook on good practices, what else would be? So first would for me interesting to have this framework clear, then I think it would be easier to answer.
Good question. Indeed. Thank you. I think, John is back with us, but yes, you can sit down and turn off your phone. No. Not a lot happening in Berlin just right now. So, I think the first question is, if we're looking at how to carry forward, say, the case studies, what are the objectives and who is the audience? If I've got that correct.
This is also a guidebook, perhaps, right?
So
Yes.
I don't want it to be like some kind of trophy on the shelf of the academias like us. You know, like, that's why I'm just keep asking if we are going to really implement this thing.
Okay, I think there's Crystal, then Eileen, then Nils, then Nabucco. And that's all I can remember.
Okay. I think if everyone wants to make a book, go ahead. My view is that, and I'll write my
That means
case.
everyone else, I think.
No, I'll write my case study and I'll happily take part. But I don't think published materials of that kind are the ways in which site managers choose to inform themselves. And also any book of case studies starts to date from the minute the ink is dry, which prevents other case studies come forward, and it also prevents updating of the case studies. So I would really advocate for a web-based product instead, a web-based product. And I think there are a number of initiatives that are already underway, either through the OWHC, but also through the World Heritage Centre, to provide platforms for guidance materials that are especially aimed at site managers. And it will. The other advantage of web-based materials is that we could start to at least partially overcome the very great barrier of language, which is a very serious issue if we keep only producing things in this language or that language, and especially if it's always mostly English, which is my self-confession about that. But I would really urge us to, do a book. And sometimes organisations really need the thing to hand to mayors and the things to hand to ministers. So I don't say don't do the book. It's just that I think the book has a different readership than a web-based product.
The obvious quick comment to make is that providing a web-based output within the framework of OWHC goes directly at what Matthias was arguing for strongly yesterday, which is tools for capacity building that OWHC delivers to the cities. Okay, who was next? Eileen.
I think what I'm going to say follows on from... I think we've been here as experts, and particularly also reflecting on what we did last year. We talk often around expertise rather than case studies. We've used case studies, but we've used those case studies to explain our... Particularly, Cassie and Barbara today, you're only using the case studies just so you can demonstrate your expertise that you're bringing to the table. And I think all of us have, we've used the case study, but it's more about expertise, tools. Yes. And I think it's almost a matrix. There's sort of tools on one side, and then there are case studies, and you could almost do a frontage to what a book or a website or, clicking on where, you want to know that tool. You've got 3 case studies actually respond. So I'm wondering whether, also, I think there's an ownership of case studies. We often come to these case studies as consultants, whereas they're owned by the cities or a bigger community of people who... So when you ask cities to provide case studies, it's very much from them. It's what they've done as a city. Whereas I think what we've dipped into them often as, Anna's got 10 she could immediately tell you about, whatever, and she's dipped into them as a researcher. So I'm wondering whether... what she brings to the table is more about the tool. And for most of us, I think that's more the case than the case study itself. So I'm wondering whether it's more about tools, and then we sort of signpost shorter case studies, and then you can have, if it's web-based or otherwise, you can click on, if you want to see how this tool's used, click on this case study or click on that, and it sort of opens up.
I think that is the huge benefit of a web-based platform, that you can make it searchable by technique or by type of audience or purpose. Or Niels. Oh, sorry, Nabucco, then Niels. Yeah. Nabucco.
Just a simple question. You said that the site managers quite wide. Is it okay, including communities or city officers or... So
Long story. We're doing this bit. Okay, and Niels, and then Russia. Okay. I'll work right to left down here, but Niels is next. Yep. You'd want to consult with the site managers. You'd want to consult with them. You want to ask them. We'd need a participatory planning process for that. Yeah, I'm being facetious because it's all about consultation. You know. Okay, I think we were going to go right to left here, if that's all right. If you can pass, you don't have to say something.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Crystal, having done case study volume. And 2012, 2013 saw several case study volumes. The World Heritage one, UNESCO one I did, but then you have the IUCN one, then World Parks did one. So there's so many case study volumes. But out of the 976 managers that were there when I was editing that volume, the majority in the survey said two things. One is they would like to engage with communities, but they don't know how to. And there really is goodwill. They want to do the right thing. And the second thing they said is the majority of them didn't know how to monitor in terms of qualitative and quantitative indicators. So those are the two things that came at the end in my report to UNESCO, to the World Heritage Center after the volume was done. So I think, the combination of comments starting from Crystal that, if something is web-based, that's interactive, can be updated, illustrated as we go along. I cannot help thinking, so the first time when I went as a migrant to Australia, I didn't understand the Borough Charter. Then came out illustrated Borough Charter. And that was like all my students had to get a copy of Illustrated Borough Charter to understand it. It was lucid, and they were all Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students, and they understood. Because they were bridging into the academy, from their communities, most of them. So I would go for that kind of, what you're talking about, but make it more interactive, where you can have little, what you're talking about is more like postcard, what we used to call postcards, case studies, little things against I think that kind of mixed structure would really be useful. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Zita?
Thank you. I'm just thinking of the targets of this, whatever we will make as a web products. But the point is, they're supposed to be from those stakeholders that related with the heritage cities. For instance, started from the mayor, from the decision makers, as well as the site managers. But in many cases, especially like Indonesia, we don't have many site managers. But what we have is the local people who become the local leader for those heritage districts, for instance. So there is no name of the site managers. This is a voluntary works by the community. So maybe we're supposed to take it into account of this.
Cassie?
So I don't know anything about your organization or your specific needs, but I can share what my organization did. And we were founded by practitioners who wanted to share and learn from other practitioners. And one of the places they started was building this, what we now have as a 5-day course called the Foundations course, which basically walks people through Jayan's principles, the core values, the code of ethics, the spectrum. How do you plan one of these processes? And it takes somebody through that, and really it's based on case studies. And so I would suggest that hearing Matthias's call yesterday for capacity building, and at two levels, capacity building in terms of the professional that does this, capacity building in terms of the community members that after the professionals leave, those community members are still there, still trying to manage those sites. You can't do it all at once, so maybe you start with the practitioners, and as practitioners, you're sharing your, what we would call war stories, your horrible warnings of this is what we learned, this is how we do it, this is how we apply these principles, and And then you're building this volume of knowledge, this body of knowledge for your field.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back to what the ultimate aim is of the community engagement tools. It's to make better community involvement practice, increase throughout the region, the Asia Pacific, and the region has its own specialties. Not enough community participatory governance, we can say, right? So. And where does that get stuck? It gets stuck in the decision makers more than the experts, if you ask me. I mean, with all the exposure to the literature out there, experts, I think, usually have an idea that they need to be community involving. But I think that's why in my stab at the application of the tools, I wanted to have the three categories, the experts, the elected local leadership, and the wider community. They all have their customized needs and weaknesses and strengths. So I wouldn't just want to narrow it down to site managers, if you ask me. I mean, and as Sita said, sometimes the roles are a bit ambiguous. So something that different kinds of stakeholders can use to get together. It should be versatile, if you ask me. And I have the kind of duty of reminding of everybody of the SDGs. Maybe we could try to connect it from some end with the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think we don't talk about it enough yet because it's a bit vague yet for people, but the reporting, the monitoring, the implementation of the SDGs is key. And at ICOMOS, we're trying to start a process of how to gather best practices to channel into reporting. And, it would be great if maybe the OWHC is a vehicle for that, a part of the process with us. So don't forget that. And I don't want to go on too long, so that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Han?
Just quickly echoes on a few things that people have mentioned. I mean, definitely I can see that there's a need for different tools for different people, but then I still think that the site managers are really the target group that we want to get to. And I just want to put myself in the shoes of the site managers who I know. They're all overworked. They all have pretty low level of motivation. So whatever the tools that come out, it needs to be very, very practical. It's almost like a troubleshooting for them to really see, okay, here's a situation that they face and here's how other people have dealt with that. So the case studies, I always find them interesting and useful, but I think maybe we need to push to a level, and maybe as a way to the guideline is to do a bit of the analysis on why these case studies are used, why they are successful, why they are not successful, what can be done to make it more successful. So I think it's simply just presenting case studies maybe not quite enough to...
Anna?
I have few comments and suggestions and ideas.
Sorry, a few brief comments, did you say?
How many minutes?
2.
Okay. Okay. So, idea that we could put a sort of training offer to the biannual World Conference, so that the site managers could come together with the mayors, and either 1 week earlier or for a few days earlier, like they do in Yaya conferences, very much a few days before, and then they offer different packages of courses. And that would be our online or offline training. We could have Ivan coming on the first years or even later, and then we could have online MOOCs. I don't know what to call MOOCs. So that also the site managers that cannot come, that they could still have the videos to use it. Certification is good for professional development. So after the conference, they will get a professional certificate and points. So that would be good. Web platforms, we also have the Global Observatory on the Historic Urban Landscape. So for a start, we could already start using that one as well. There's already some case studies there. But also I would advocate, because we already know for each other very well, and that we work together towards, common, I wouldn't say that we use the same methodology, But for example, if we have this discussion, okay, which are the stakeholders and the categories, with our case studies for later in the future, and to integrate the results from the different case studies and to showcase them on the courses, we could agree upon a categorization of stakeholders to use in our research projects, you know, and then all of a sudden we could link all our case studies together and make a more general report. So that would bring also a link to what Eileen said, to have the case studies, but also tools. So I say case studies and tagging on categories, tagging on stakeholders, so that they would know what but also for us to start working virtually together. And that's my wildest dream until I retire. I really would like that we stop just having case studies individually and then we all go home and we make a book with different chapters, but actually that we can start link them. Let's link them and see what we can learn from them together. Yeah. So,
thank you.
Was 2 minutes?
Okay, I know, okay, one, two.
Comment. I would like to ask to ourselves, do we know enough about what the site managers are facing daily basis? Are we just trying to be, again, from top down to do? I mean, if we don't, then I think, yes, it is really important to invite site managers. But again, before doing that, I think we have to fully understand what kind of daily basis practical problems that they face. Do we know enough?
Okay, thank you.
Just
Johannes.
wondering, because not all members of this organization actually has a heritage sites, World Heritage Site in their city. For example, like Solo, Surakarta, doesn't have anything. The Sangiran site belong to Central Java province. So they wish to become a World Heritage City. They are very messy. And then look into, say, Denpasar. Disaster doesn't have. Even, it's because of Solo start this. And then it's become like every cities in the world can become a member of this organization. So we must be aware what kind of tools that we will produce for those two categories of cities. One is the cities already have World Heritage Sites, how to manage that World Heritage better. And second is the wish list, or the city has a dreams to become a World Heritage City that needs help how to develop or to justify the selection of sites.
Thank you. One breath one, yes. Okay, before I ask Mike to... Okay, we'll be inclusive. We will be inclusive.
I'll be fast.
I'm going to talk before we go to lunch, okay? Just so we all understand.
In doing my work in this type of situation with other organizations, I think simplified focus is better. So I want to ditto everything people said, because if we focus too large, then things don't get done. So I like the site manager focus, and I could go on about that, but I won't. But the other piece I was going to throw out there, and I'm just learning your system, but having some type of online interactive group. I mean, what comes to mind in other groups is they have like a private Facebook group or some private group where the site managers can talk on a day-to-day basis or throw up a little sentence about, hey, I'm having this issue. What have you guys done? So that it's more kind of a living moment-to-moment interaction and learn from each other as a group rather than individually and worried about looking at a book on a shelf, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, there are a couple of other... Hang on.
then also the managing this site is also changing. We had only the administrative, the person's managing, but now it changed to some of the researchers also taking care of it. So I think we need better to support some kind of case studies. It's useful for them to future management.
Thank you. Lunchtime's approaching, so the hands are down. I would just like to try and synthesize what I've heard and reflect back to you. And my suggestion... Oh. You have the con.
I'm sorry.
Seeking the Lyon Award for contribution to the meeting.
Right.
Sorry, Barbara, you will not get that. That was a reference to yesterday.
No, sorry, I just didn't. There was a bit of confusion. I just want to say, first of all, that we're dealing with urban heritage and not all heritage. So the case studies are urban. So the first responsibility is exactly structuring the urban, and together with Anna and other teams, we started a debate which should have taken place in Istanbul on the Saturday night, and which didn't take place. But we tried to then structure and characterize different urban characteristics. The second thing, we speak about site managers in urbanism. I don't know whether that's the right term. We're taking always the term of the sites and not of the urbanism. And perhaps we often have focal points who are actually dealing with it, because they might have a series of communities, even as a group. So I think that might be a way which we have to then also look at. I think what Sinjun said also about the importance of what are the issues they're facing. Again, if this is World Heritage, we've got a body of knowledge. So it's called State of Conservation. We can tell you we've identified all the threats of what people are facing. So we can provide a basis by which, in fact, people can then start merging together and understanding then these issues. So I think it's the harmonization of data. If we're looking at the World Heritage sites and others, I think we could just simply say legalistically tentative lists. Okay, so people who are on, they're the people who are potentially on the list. So I wouldn't go anything more. Use existing language which we have within the system, and I think that is the best way of dealing with it. And I would also that, in fact, we have to then deal with short, medium, and long-term issues. Politicians change, their agendas are a little bit different than the communities, and even the communities are now changing rapidly. But I would like to relate then to what Ega said about the importance of the SDGs, but that is very global. So we're working, shall we say, we at UNESCO at that sort of level. Jyoti is taking responsibility of integrating all aspects of UNESCO within the SDGs. I don't think that by themselves they're relevant for the focal points, and that I think we should take on board the whole, as was saying, and we have to spend time working out how it's integrated so we don't get this fatigue, and most certainly the new urban agenda. That is our main marching orders, and the new urban agenda is part of the SDGs. This is part of it is the detailing of the this part. Now I'm saying it from a wider aspect, is that if, in fact, cities are having to, and I've said this to many, many people, is that instead of us going to governments and saying, oh, we need this, we don't need anything. They need us. And they need us because reporting is taking place, and we're spending all our time reporting instead of doing things. So we have to work this one out. And I think that if we know that these are the things which are the legalistically structures are being demanded, then we have to then work around this and use it rather than see it as dead weight. And I think this is something which is very critical. And I think that with the case studies, I think I take all the ideas of putting them on Facebook and things like that. That's so important. But our support must be in structuring them. So therefore people can then put their elements within the structures, how the data is managed. They can say, "Oh, I'm a governance. If I'm a federal structure, that I've got a regional things, then I should not look at Sweden. That's not the right place. I should look then at another example." So we've got a help to actually understanding these parts. So this is what I have to say.
I don't think the SDGs were under threat. So perhaps the meeting will recognise the chair. Colleagues, I would like to try and synthesise that, and my suggestion for you to contemplate is that between now and our after coffee break discussion, I will try and get some words to put up on the screen. Again, this meeting, as with yesterday's meeting, has no formal status or imprimatur. We can just ultimately provide some thoughts to Jayon, or if you want to, we could try and provide something to the General Assembly. But it seems to me, in no particular order, that the things where we have commonality are that the most advantageous presentation of the content of what we've been doing is web-based. And that should probably be on the OWHC platform, because the bit of the world we're dealing with is the cities on or aspirational in a kind of World Heritage context. That we need to not just be empirical experts didactically delivering. We need to ask the site managers or local leaders, and I think we have a little bit of terminology to sort out. Matthias, as I've talked to him, tends to use a European framework in constructing this, whereas I think Sida's point about actually it's not always a site manager. Sometimes it's just the local leader within or without the government structure. So we need to ask them, engage with them, funnily enough, consult with them about what they need. Thirdly, that there is value in the case study format, provided there is this tools and techniques as opposed to the narrative, and that's got to be cross-reference, searchable, have tags so that it works, so that people can go in and say, well, I'm doing this sort of project, great, here's 4 different things I can look at, now I've got some ideas. I would add to that, standard format's really helpful. When you're using these tools as a practitioner, it's a pain in the neck to have to wade through written papers. You just want to know, I've got a thing where I need to consult with agitated local residents who's done it in comparable situations. Oh, I like what's been done over here. I'll shamelessly steal that methodology. Then, I think in terms of the framing, actually it is important that it be cast within the context of SDGs, as in, look, this is actually part of a global program. And there is already an approach adopted by UNESCO in Hull. So I'm not suggesting we say, oh, this is all this, but we need to point out this is consistent with this. We're not going into dangerous new ground. In terms of the principles for community engagement tools, there's a place for them in the front end. The ones that have already been developed through the 3 workshop processes, it seems to me that they are a tool, just like there are other tools, and they can be presented. That going forward, we need to engage and involve the site manager, local leaders. So if there is another gathering like this, actually we need them to be present. So that goes to that whole concept of making an offer where a future World Congress or a future regional meeting actually has this training capacity building component for those people. Nearly there. So next time, the answer to next time is perhaps more course-based, more teaching, learning-based than expert sharing-based. And certification, I get the point that that needs to be considered, because that will make a difference to some of the participants. You know, I know there are certain state parties that certification they get funded, non-certification they don't get funded. So I think that's highly relevant. And finally, my view would be this is the organisation of World Heritage Cities, so this should be framed as a World Heritage City initiative. If it's relevant to other cities, it shouldn't be, oh, you can only use this, you know, if you're on the list or on the tentative list. I mean, that's rubbish. You just say, well, look, we've developed it to help the World Heritage City challenges, and if it's relevant to your city, go for it. So my suggestion is, how about instead of I'll just drop out of my group because there's a supernumerary, and I'll put something together for us to have a look at later. How does that sound? Yeah. Well, I think you can. You'll moderate. You'll moderate these guys. Yeah. Yep. Well, my suggestion is it's now lunchtime, and is it? And I guess what I'm testing is there anything that I have said there? Because I think I was trying to just harvest all your good ideas and make them look like mine. Is there anything I've said there that people are sort of completely uncomfortable with? Not. Well, I'll put it together and bring it back, and again, a bit like we did yesterday, we just will do it in English, so there'll be no discussing the Spanish translation. Please. Okay. And I will delegate to Niels the job of rapporteur or whatever in my group. Yeah, thank you. Don't think pick on me. Think I have been chosen. Yes. I think that, to my mind, that goes right up the top with the second thing about really, before rushing ahead with us deciding what they need, asking them might be a really good idea. John?
I'd like to just have a last comment, give a last comment, because I have to conduct the regional meeting of the Asia Pacific region, so I will not be here for afternoon session. I'm really sorry about that. I feel really bad. I feel terrible about that. But I'm also, I'd like to apologize for not, smooth flows and process of this timeline. Sorry about that. It's just, if you have any inconvenience, it's just on me. It's just crazy schedule, and it's on me. And I should have managed a bit more my time a bit better. I feel sorry about that. And about I have to talk about the practical matters, because we are talking about the tools and web-based products and things like that. What I can do, and the course as well, what I can do is, it's very practical, but practical matter. I have a budget for the next regional conference in 2018. It's not that much, but we can build a small coursework for the site managers. If we invite site managers to the next host city of the regional conference, which will be decided in the afternoon. So that could be one idea of implementing what we have done and the ideas you guys have given me. And also, we could do some kind of survey in terms of, the different systems and legal systems, and we can find out how we can actually implement these things. Yeah, that's one idea from me, and I'm again very sorry for not being here in the afternoon. I will be room 201, I guess. Talking to the mayors about the programs and where they want to go for the next trip in Asia Pacific region meeting. I know they don't care where they go. They just want to have fun with their entourages. So yeah. So I'll be there, talking about that. And I wish we have a successful and practical as well, practical conclusion. And we can have some, it's not done yet. It's process. It's still in the process, and I hope we can develop and conclude it's not conclusion, but we can have more specific ways that we can walk together, because I'm such a huge fan of all of you. I have read all the materials you have written and you have published. So it's an honor for me privately to have all of you here, and thank you very much for coming. Yeah, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Yeah, thank you.
And you don't need to worry because the arrangements have been perfectly fine and excellent, and thank you. And you need to, when this is all over, watch the film called Multiplicity starring Michael Keaton, where he had himself cloned so that he could do everything he had to do.